Welcome once again to the Crash MotoGP podcast. I am indeed your host, Harry Benjamin. Keith Hewen and Pete McLaren are here as ever to provide hot air and some wonderful insight too. On the show this week, though, we'll be discussing the updated calendar after a few changes and cancellations sadly have occurred in the last week. The curious case of Dani Pedrosa and his temptations of a wildcard entry with KTM. Last year, Moto2 rider Marco Bezzecchi was hotly tipped for a MotoGP ride. He even turned down Aprilia, but what's next for him? And is Raul Fernandez's deal to MotoGP as good as done? Plus, the day has arrived. Pete, myself, and your questions, dear listener, that you have sent in will be thrown at the man, the myth, the legend, former British champion and BT Sport commentator Keith Hewen, as we unpick just a little bit about how Keith's career got started and some of his personal highlights from years gone by. I think that sounds like a decent lineup, but before we talk all things Keith Hewen, let's get Keith Hewen to talk all things MotoGP. And it's a bit of a sad start, isn't it, with the 2021 calendar update, because Australia has been confirmed as cancelled for this year once again, the round in Phillip Island, due to the ongoing travel complications, obviously, in logistics with the pandemic. So it's bad news, isn't it? Especially, we've got Miller and Gardner doing well in MotoGP and Moto2. So it's a shame, isn't it, to lose Australia again?
Well, the best one on the calendar as far as track's concerned and riders are concerned. So missing out on Australia is huge, absolutely massive. But it's not going to be the only one, I don't think. I mean, Thailand, Malaysia, they are... Obviously, Japan's already gone, and they're having ongoing issues with the Olympics and the like out there as well. So I think Asia in general, it's all very well us lot being jabbed to the limit as we are. I've had my 2 jabs and I'm perfectly good for everything. I've got my certificate that says I could travel, but actually nobody wants us in their country anyway. Yeah. So we're in a difficult position anyway. This might be the great country as far as all the jabs are concerned, and we're reasonably immune to it all. But everywhere else in the world is a bit behind us, and of course this is a global inoculation that's necessary to get people moving. The World Superbike round was at Donington Park last weekend, and the fact of the matter is I was going to go up on the Friday, and then when I saw the amount of paperwork that I was going to have to fill out and the tests I was going to have to take just for those 2 or 3 hours of business on a Friday afternoon, I didn't bother in the end. I met people in a hotel outside of the track. But when you've got a global bubble that's moving as one, a group of 3,000 odd people that are going from country to country, you have to guarantee to the country you're going to that bubble is secure. And that's the big issue. It's making sure that bubble doesn't actually spread the disease into a country that's not yet inoculated up to the required percentage. I mean, it's a nightmare. Thailand is so far behind in their inoculations. I can't see us going to Thailand, to be honest. There's bits of Thailand. I read this only this morning that Koh Samui is now open to international travel. But for how long is the question? I mean, Koh Samui is obviously a little island off Thailand, so therefore maybe they can contain it within that island, and that's why they've opened it. Phuket has opened a little bit likewise. That's only got a bridge onto the mainland of Thailand as well. So we are going to see some more cancellations yet. How many rounds can we have at Portimao in a year?
Well, this is the thing, isn't it, Pete? We've got Portimao rejoining again with the Algarve Grand Prix. That's going to be the penultimate race of the season, I suppose, all being well. But you can't really predict what's going to be the penultimate race of the season at this stage. But provisionally, it is. We've already had a race there in April, dominated by Quartararo, Bagnaia and Mir also on the podium. So I suppose they might be quite happy to go back there. But it's another round in Portimao. But I suppose at the end of the day, we've got to fill up the calendar somehow.
That's it, Harry, isn't it? And, as you've been saying, this is an update. It's certainly not the final calendar. There will be more changes. As Keith says, that the Asian races, the flyaways are the ones that are really hanging in the balance. And you've got to imagine if one goes, suddenly the other one doesn't become viable. Malaysia's been moved to the weekend after Buriram. But if one of them goes, do you then go all that way for one race? Maybe you could do a back-to-back double header, but again, and the same with COTA. COTA at the moment is a kind of standalone event. You'd have to think, they're doing very well with vaccinations, so that's good news on that front. But surely that should probably be a back-to-back event, to make it worthwhile if Argentina isn't going to come back. Argentina is still postponed, not yet officially cancelled. But, so we're going to see a lot more updates. I guess the good news is it looks like they will be able to, by adding these other events, let's say other races at tracks we've already been to, or doubling up if you like, that they'll be able to keep somewhere near the intended 18 or 19 rounds. So that at least looks like it'll be possible.
Dorna dipping in their deep pockets again, but there are some teams that might actually be glad of a few rounds off, judging by the engine lists that we've all been studying over the last little while. With the loss of obviously there's restricted motors. Those with concessions have got a few extra opportunities perhaps, but there are some that have used up motors. When you looked at it recently, Peter, I think you've done a bit of a study on this just recently. There's a few that have been withdrawn already out of the allocation.
Yeah, it was quite surprising, wasn't it, that Alex Rins, we thought, when would his bad luck end? We now see that he's lost 2 engines out of 7 already. Withdrawn, meaning when Keith says withdrawn, that those aren't coming back. Those are engines that have been taken out, and he can't use them again. So it's quite unusual to lose. Well, his teammate hasn't lost any, so that says it all. And it seems like I thought maybe it was some sort of crash damage or something like that, but it seems that wasn't the case. The one engine we saw stop in practice in Germany, but that one had already been used kind of in session since Qatar, so not a big issue. But the other one had only been used really at one event before it was being withdrawn. Don't know quite exactly what went on, but it seems like it was something outside of the engine had a fault, and it ended up doing some damage inside the engine.
Yeah, that's the rider throwing it through gravel.
But that's the thing, though, as well as these obviously engine changes and classifications as well, it's a 19-race calendar currently as it stands with these changes that have come in place into the last year. That's still a pretty full calendar, and you've got to surely take into account in the last few years, across different motorsports, calendars have been getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Double headers, triple headers. It's going to take a toll mentally and physically on all the riders and the engineers and the team personnel that are going round. So surely they're not going to be too disheartened at losing these rounds, not only for these engine issues, but also just for their own sanity.
Well, they had a big break in the middle of the season this year, so it's going to be intensive towards the end of it. And of course, it's the not knowing. Data is everything in Grand Prix and in any kind of motorsport. So that preparation for what's coming next is critical. It's a thing that nobody likes. Nobody likes the variable of perhaps going to a track that they hadn't really prepped for, hadn't really sorted the data out on. So the unknown is not fun from a motorsports team point of view, that's for sure.
Well, Daniel Coyle has asked, hello again, guys. Keith, do you think historic tracks such as Monza and Spa-Francorchamps should once again be on the calendar? Oh, Paul Ricard as well, he quickly adds in. Dorna should help pay for mods to do so, no? And remember, it's works, not factory. Well,
nobody wants to go to Paul Ricard unless they're on some kind of hallucinogenic drug to look at that paint job that's around there. I mean, who the hell would want to ride around that? It'd send you insane. Ricard, obviously, is a great old track. Spa, of course. Everybody wants to go to Spa. Riders that have not ridden on Spa or competitively at Spa, that have done the classic meetings there, have loved every minute of it. So Spa would be a great one. And Blanchimont and places, corners like Blanchimont that used to be just, 3 foot from the edge of the road was the barrier and then a cliff off into the trees. They've made modifications there, but still not good enough for Grand Prix. There's no way we're going back to Spa or any of these type races, unfortunately, as much as I would campaign for it, because they are so dangerous. From a motorcycle point of view, you can't get the runoff that you need at corners like Blanchimont. I lost a mate of mine there, Kevin Rettam. Just no room to once you fall at a place like that, you've got no room to run off, to roll over in the gravel. It's bad enough as it is, let alone when you've got a metal barrier or a set of trees to roll into. So as much as we love the classics, you're going to have to stick with what we've got, I think. Can't say better than that. I'd love to see a Grand Prix at Brands Hatch. Full circuit at Brands Hatch. Oh, that would be just Oulton Park. Can you imagine? Oulton Park.
We're spoiled for choice in the UK.
You'd have to shut Cheshire.
Well, thank you, Daniel, for sending in your question. But yeah, it looks like it's going to be at the moment provisionally a 19-race calendar, currently finishing up with Valencia in November. But we're still very much not out of this global pandemic, so expect more changes to happen throughout the season, but hopefully not too many. Now, things are hotting up a little bit around Dani Pedrosa and KTM. He has said it could be interesting to enter a MotoGP race as a wild card for KTM to enhance his test riding work. Pete, you've been hearing about this a lot, haven't you? It looks like, he's definitely being entered for at least one race, either at the upcoming Austrian rounds or maybe Misano. So what's the latest on that you can tell us?
Well, the first thing is that, Pedrosa has sort of turned down these opportunities for many years. I mean, KTM would have been happy to offer him a wild card. He's been doing this testing and wild card job since he retired at the end of 2018, basically, having been a Honda rider for all of his career. And he then went to KTM. And he's been happy doing test riding. And KTM have always said, if you ever want a wild card, it's there. And he's never been interested until now. So that in itself is, why now? What's changed? Yeah. Now, as you say there, what he's saying is that it will take the test riding to the next level, that KTM have lost concessions, so that there is testing restrictions with the race riders have gone up a notch, if you like. And so, he'd be able to do race distances, a real Grand Prix comparison between new parts and maybe the parts they've got now. Is it just that? Who knows? But it sounds like what we do know is that KTM have applied for wildcards. Now, that doesn't mean that they'll actually use them. So that's the other thing. So, but just that in itself, and the fact that Pedrosa is coming out and saying he's interesting is certainly, that in itself is a big change from his, let's say, attitude in the past towards it.
The first thing I do whenever the entry list comes out for every Grand Prix, when IRTA, the International Race Teams Association, send out that email to us privileged few, or privileged many as it is now, you straight away look down for wildcards and substitutes to see who's coming in, because that's an exciting part of the entry. I miss wildcards. I think wildcards are fantastic. They add a dimension. When you used to have a Japanese rider that would come in that you'd never heard of, and he'd be fast, and he'd be on a motor. And you see, the thing I love about it is, back in the day, you could run you could bring something exotic. You suddenly turn up with a motorbike that was completely different from all the other factory bikes. Now that's what I call a proper wildcard, and we should have them back. But difficult times, and so that's why everything has been shut down a little bit. Maybe we'll see that again in the future, but particularly with Moto3 and Moto2, wildcards in Moto3 and Moto2, that's how you bring in to have a look at a guy that's doing the business in his national championship. Let's have him in there. Let's bring him in. And I think wildcards are a very important part of it. I miss that, the proliferation, if you like, of names that I've never heard of, and then we're all scratching around looking them up, trying to work out what championships they've won in some far offshore somewhere. It's not quite like that nowadays because we know most of them, but it is still quite exciting to see somebody new. But particularly, I think if they were allowed again to run that fully trick, brand spanking new, completely different. Forget about concessions for all the normal factory riders, but if they were allowed to bring that full test bed to the track, whether they didn't score any points or something along those lines, I don't know how you deal with it, but wouldn't it be exciting?
Yeah.
Well, actually, I'm sure a lot of people would love to see Pedrosa, back on and racing in a Grand Prix. But as you say, should a wild card be reserved for a new driver to try someone out from Moto2 and Moto3? Is it a bit, I don't want, unfair is the wrong word. Obviously, Pedrosa's been developing that bike and he is the man developing it, so he would learn a lot. But should it be actually more reserved for people who are new and trying to show their cards in MotoGP?
Not too many people that can ride a MotoGP bike anywhere in the world. So I think it's a situation where I think with MotoGP particularly, you're a bit restricted to people that are good on a MotoGP bike, like Danny Pedrosa, Cal Crutchlow, originally Jorge Lorenzo and people like that. Otherwise, it could turn out into a massive mess. Do you remember Christophe Ponson when the French guy came along to Le Mans and got absolutely slammed by everybody in sight? And I remember feeling really diabolically sorry for him, because when I looked at his times, I remember thinking, that ain't bad, really, considering he just slung his leg over it for the first time. And, there's some footballers that are feeling like Ponson did at the moment, I think.
Speaking of Moto2 and Moto3 riders, though, as you mentioned there, Keith, with your wildcard talk, Raul Fernandez. A lot of talk about him yet again. It's been a spectacular start for his Moto2 career. He made an immediate impact, didn't he, with second on the grid on debut in Qatar, followed by a podium next time out, and then victory at round 3. It took him 42 races to notch up 2 wins in Moto3, but only 5 starts to reach the same tally in Moto2. You can read that whole article on crash.net as well. He now has 3 wins, 6 podiums from 9 rounds. There's been a lot of rumours about whether he will make the move up to MotoGP, especially with Tech 3 KTM. There's a couple of other rumours floating about as well, but hearing on the ground, it looks like actually that deal may be done.
It's incredible, isn't it? I mean, you find some riders are little bike riders and some riders are big bike riders. Some can make the transition up the ladder to the fastest tackle, the most exotic kit, and others can't. And that's always been the way over the years. Some riders have been restricted through size or whatever it might be to the smaller bikes. And then you get a guy like Raul, the harder it gets, the faster it gets, the more intense it becomes, the more technically difficult it becomes with the big bikes. He's rising to the occasion. We've seen riders like that throughout the ages. And he really looks like he's going to be one of them.
Pete, you're the one who texted me this morning saying you definitely think the deal is done there. So what's changed in the last week or so? Because he's been saying, hasn't he, that I'm going to stay in Moto2. That's probably what's going to happen.
That's right. These rumours are nothing new. We've spoken about it before. He's certainly been linked for the last couple of races before the summer break with a potential move, but he's always kind of played it down and said he expected to stay in Moto2. But he also said that there would be this meeting during the summer break with KTM and Tech 3 have also been clear that the summer break would be when this other ride is decided. And yet, what I'm hearing from good, reliable sources is if it's not already done, then it's pretty close. And it seems like, if you're KTM, you want to do whatever Raul Fernandez wants to keep him happy, because he's clearly, as you mentioned with his stats, he's a future star there. I mean, to have done what he's done already in just 9 races, you look at Joan Mir. He only had 1 year in Moto2 as well. He's the reigning champion now, but he didn't win a race. He had, I think, 4 podiums. He was 6th in the World Championship. 0 pole positions, 0 wins. Now, there was a lot of tough riders during that year as well with Mir, guys that he's racing against now at MotoGP. But still, the point is, KTM don't want to lose Raul Fernandez. For me, if he is going up next year, and that's what all the indications are, it's because Fernandez has decided that's what I want to do, basically. I think KTM would have been willing, if he said, you know what, yeah, I think another year in Moto2 would be good for me, and then I'll go up, they'd have been happy to do that. But I think if that is happening, it's because he's decided, yeah, I'm ready. And to be honest, what more can he achieve? I mean, if he just matches what he's done so far, he will have won, he'll end the year with 6 wins and 12 podiums. I mean, if Moto2 is really just a transition class to get you to MotoGP, it's mission accomplished, really, isn't it?
It's the Quartararo factor, isn't it? He only won, officially, 1 race in Moto2. And look what he did when he got up to MotoGP. That has got to be an example that will be playing on Rail's mind as well, and obviously the team. The fact is if he does turn out to be that big bike rider, as Quartararo clearly did, then it's the definite right move. And don't hang around for another year. If you didn't win the world title, Quartararo didn't win the Moto2 world title, was nowhere near it. The fact of the matter is, he saw something in the bike, they saw something in him, the opportunity was there, he grabbed it with both hands, and that's all she wrote, really. Could be world champion this year.
He's clearly working well with his teammate as well in terms of Remy Gardner and really making sure, even though he's got more experience than he has, that he's really, putting him to the test. So to have those two in the same team, theoretically, in MotoGP could be something quite spectacular.
Remy is going to be absolutely brilliant on a big bike. Every time I've ever spoken to Wayne, going back years now, when he spoke about Remy, he said once he gets on big bikes, he just drifts them. He's just got that, he said, natural ability, throttle control on a big machine with plenty of horsepower. Wayne was always convinced that Remy would come into his own once he got up there into MotoGP. And he does know a bit, Wayne Gardner, despite the fact he talks a lot of rubbish on everything else. But anyway. Hiya, Wayne.
Yeah. Any complaints, do send them to Keith at crash.net and we'll get them read out. But, we shall wait and see what happens there once again. But it does look like, as you're saying, Pete, the deal may well be done and perhaps even an announcement before we finish the summer break. We shall see. Still on Moto2, though, as well. Marco Bezzecchi, there's some news coming out about him this week. Currently being left a little bit distant third in the championship by his IO rivals. It's actually Pecco Bagnaia coming out saying that, Bezzecchi's pushing like hell every single time and doing a really good job, despite maybe what you're seeing on track in terms of being slightly overshadowed. He was hotly tipped to make the move up last year. He actually said no to an Aprilia ride, along with many other riders as well. VR46 seems like the obvious move up but it all depends on Valentino Rossi, of course, and a number of other factors. But how are you thinking Bezzecchi's season is going so far? And actually, as we talk about Moto2 and just, being a transition class, has he done enough already? Does it matter that he's actually being a little bit overshadowed right now?
Sign of the times, isn't it, when you've got quality like that that may be overshadowed by someone else all of a sudden. It's just a case of the state of our sport at the moment. It's in such good order that somebody like Bezzecchi, normally you grab hold of him and he'd be sorted in the team. How long's a piece of string? It's one of them ones where this kind of speculation at this time of the year, the summer break, it's what we all do and amuse ourselves with, isn't it? To prove how smart or not we are come later in the year. I mean, I wouldn't want to be in Pete's domain all the time, because once you write it down and it's there,
etched forever. Well, we're also hearing though, Pete, that VR46 is the obvious step, but actually the Yamaha satellite could also be a place that Bezzecchi could end up. Is there as much traction there though?
Again, that all depends on what Valentino Rossi does. I mean, if Rossi...
He's leaving. He's going to retire. Have you seen him on his boat with his girlfriend? I mean, he looks more at home on that bloody boat than he does on an M1 Yamaha nowadays.
Will you commit that to writing? There we go. But there's options up there, but it does all depend, doesn't it, on Valentino Rossi and a number of other factors, doesn't it? So it's difficult to gauge.
Going back to what Keith said, it's this big thing about young riders when they choose to make that move to MotoGP. We're talking about Fernandez looking like he's probably decided, yes, I only need 1 year and I'm going. Whereas we saw last year that guys decided, no, I don't want to go yet. I want to wait another year. But what if the chance, as we're seeing now, you don't get that progression that you may be expecting? What if next year is harder than this year and the offers all dry up? We can all think of riders that at one time were offered decent rides, turned them down, expecting that their career would get better and better and they'd be even better offers in the future. Instead, there were none. So it's really difficult to know, when to take the move, who with, and sometimes you've got to take a gamble. It might not be the best bike on the grid, but you've got to make something of it. And if you turn it down, it can be a risky move, I think.
Well, we will again wait for that, because we love a speculation. It's all you can really do, isn't it, in this summer break? But we've had a couple of listener questions in as well, off the back of last week, and actually just off the back of something we've been talking about there in terms of Moto2 and Moto3. Nathan has asked, why don't Yamaha develop a Moto3 bike or have an affiliate team so they can secure and hold on to young talent early? It's something we've discussed here. KTM had to make the risk of sort of delving into their talent pool a year earlier than perhaps they wanted, but at least they've got one.
That's a good question, actually, because the Moto3 class opened up. It's Honda and KTM now, with some KTM badge bikes that are about as well. But the point being is that it's always been that way. Mahindra were there at one stage, looking really, really quite good before they went off electric car racing, decided to redirect their cash somewhere else to the whining electric cars. I don't know what the rules are at the moment. It's fairly well split by IRTA and Dorna. They allocate how the rider can't suddenly say he wants to be on a KTM if there's no more KTM berths left, for instance. And likewise, there's no you can't naturally get a Honda should you want one, and there isn't one left in your allocation. So it's strictly controlled by IRTA and Dorna regarding who's got what. I don't know really the politics of that. It would be nice to have a bigger spread of manufacturer in Moto3, I've got to say, and that would seem to be a fair way, to answer the question, a fair way of stretching the ladder slightly at GP level for the other manufacturers. Whether Yamaha would be even interested in taking them on, I have no idea. I mean, we even saw the mighty but small KTM bail out of their Moto2 program to allocate all of their tech and all of their men, all of their resources into the KTM MotoGP bike, and it's worked wonders for them by doing that. So I suppose it comes down at the end of the day to how stretched a manufacturer is in their funding and their personnel. I don't think Yamaha have a great record, to be honest, in their MotoGP classes. Petronas, the Petronas Sepang International Racing Team seemed like a knee-jerk reaction to the fact everyone was on their case that they were only running, 2 factory bikes out there. and it was to their detriment that they were running 2 factory bikes. It's amazing that they produced a motorbike that is as good as it is based on the amount of data that's being sucked up nowadays. I mentioned it last time we were talking. Ducati are going to have, 8 bikes on the grid next year. That's a massive amount of data that's coming in via different teams. And with that, there are subtleties that, they won't have concessions perhaps, but you can have an upgrade on a fairing, for instance, on your aero. But you can have an upgrade on your, as far as my understanding is concerned, you can have an upgrade per team. So there's a situation where you can actually alternate where you think your development's going. I think that I'm right in saying that. I'll have to speak to Danny Aldridge, the technical director, for a bit of clearance on that one. But I'm fairly sure that you can, per team, have this change. So keep on saying it. At this level, data is everything. When you're looking for a thousandth of a second, it's so minute that the advantage you're looking for, spread over 8 bikes compared with 2 factory bikes and 2 satellite bikes like you've got in Yamaha, Ducati seem to have naturally an advantage straight away on data. Which only underlines again how remarkable the M1 Yamaha is.
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, Gigi Dall'Igna is a very, very clever operator, I think, isn't he? As far as loopholes in the rules and just everything. But when he speaks, he doesn't give much away. He's a very good speaker. He's very, he's great, but he doesn't give much away. But one of the things I remember him saying was that when you're developing a bike, you can't listen to just one rider. Even if you've got the best riders in the world, you've always got to sort of average things and look at, as Keith was saying, you've got to look at the other bikes. And when you see the TV cameras in the pits, you'll see Gigi down in the satellite team pits after a session talking to a rider about something. And you just don't seem to see the other manufacturers doing that same thing to that degree. Maybe KTM with Tech Trois, you quite often see the top guys, going back and forth. But Gigi's always, or Paolo Ciabatti, the sporting director at Ducati, they're quite often seen in one of the satellite team pits, listening into the debriefs, or and it seems like Gigi's quite he's quite adamant on that you have to take into account. It doesn't matter if the guy's 10th place or first. All of that data comes in handy, as Keith was saying. It's all data that needs to apply as far as getting that bike to work the way you want it. And I think having 8 bikes on the grid, they know that that's going to be really helpful for them for next year. And just coming back to the Moto3 question, for me, I think the only manufacturer that there was maybe hope that they might come in was TM, the Italian manufacturer that had done a couple of wild cards. And I think Danny Aldridge was hoping that they might sort of make that step. But I guess with COVID, that's kind of put everything on hold. So I don't know how difficult it would be under all these technical freezes now that we've got with bike design and things for a new manufacturer to actually come in. They'd certainly be welcome. But I think for Yamaha, as Keith said, they probably put their eggs in the Petronas basket. They probably thought VR46 as well. Those two together could be their kind of route to getting riders into the team, the MotoGP team. You've got to ask, how much benefit does Honda get from having the Moto3 bike? It's their bike, but there's individual teams within that, isn't there? The riders seem to be more allegiance to the team than the bike sometimes in those smaller classes. So it's a difficult one. I think that clearly we've seen the benefit of having these clearly defined staircases to the top, but as far as actually making the bike, I'm not sure it's that clear cut, if you see what I mean.
Picking up on your data acquisition and focusing on one rider, I think Honda is the prime example of that, aren't they, really, with Marc Marquez? I mean, over the years, there's only one bloke that's been able to ride that bike to the standard that he's been able to ride it. Cal Crutchlow had a damn good go at it. Taka Nakagami's had quite a good go at it as well, but really that bike was focused on what one rider wanted, and one rider got it. Which made it very, very difficult for the other riders within the Honda team, the Honda setup. Moving on.
Yeah, well, it's one to ponder. Thank you, Nathan, for that question. We've had another one in as well. Unfortunately, I haven't got a name for this one, but jumping back
Bert.
up. Bert.
I'm going to call him Bert.
Bert.
He or her.
Well, Bert, or potentially someone like that, has asked, do you think Yamaha will try to sign Joan Mir for 2023? Personally, I think he's getting extremely frustrated at Suzuki, and I think he would be an ideal target for Yamaha.
Well, I mean, Yamaha have had one guy that's come from Suzuki, and that didn't work out too well. So, Mir at the moment, I think he comes under the same heading for me. He needs to work around his problems. If Rins can come back after ramming a van on his push bike and have the better of him, still pretty well injured, then I would say that Joan Mir needs to look in the mirror a little bit at himself and try to work through his own problems as well. I was, of course, alluding to Maverick Vinales going to Yamaha from Suzuki prior to talking about Rins again. But I don't know, Mir seems to have had a dip this year. Has that got anything to do with the fact Davide Brivio has moved on? Maybe that pastoral care from the, Brivio going to Formula One. They weren't expecting that at Suzuki. That came pretty well out of the blue, I think. And again, it's one of them situations where it's easy to dismiss or overlook just how important a man like Brivio would be in a team. And I think that it's an integrated setup nowadays in all of these teams. It's not just about the rider. It's about every person right the way through the ecology of a team, really, as it develops over the years. And I think Suzuki were in a very, very good place for quite a long time. Only this year, really, they've taken a bit of a dip, in my opinion.
I think absolutely Brivio, where they will feel the loss is when they come to negotiating with riders, isn't it? I mean, that was where he was really good at picking these young guys from Moto2, the Joan Mirs, Alex Rins, Maverick Vinales, and not only picking them, but actually fighting off other factories that wanted to get them, wasn't it? He to join a team that, like, why would you join Suzuki a few years ago rather than Repsol Honda? But he was able to convince Mir, no, you should come to us. And yeah, I think that is because on the technical side, I mean, all the Japanese are still the same. They should be able to develop the bike. The bike is obviously a great all-round package, but that is just the area you do worry they might suffer. How are they going to negotiate when it comes to all these rider contracts for next year to get the guys they want? As far as Yamaha and Mir, I mean, I think a lot will depend on, if you're Mir, you're looking at how the other Yamahas get on. I mean, at the moment, that is a one-man bike at the moment, isn't it? We've said Marquez and Honda, Quartararo and Yamaha. I think, if it remains that way, you're going to be a bit cautious about going to that team. But a lot can happen between now and then.
Yeah, and I think that's not quite as level as perhaps you've said it there, Peter, when you think about it. I mean, Maverick Vinales clearly has got a problem. 50% of it I'll put down to him and 50% down to the team because they can't seem to work it out between them. And Valentino Rossi is 42 years old. So, I mean, I think that, yeah, I understand what you're saying, but I think also there's other side effects there that are really making the M1 not quite as good as it probably could be. Is Quartararo that much better than Maverick Vinales and Valentino Rossi?
Yeah, I mean, I remember talking to Hervé Poncharal, actually. Quite interesting. When Quartararo's first year, his rookie year, and, we were all raving about him, but remember, Hervé had Zarco, who'd finished on the podium on a satellite Yamaha, just like Quartararo was doing. And I said to her, Hervé, is there much difference in what Quartararo is doing now compared to Zarco? And he said, for me, the difference is that Zarco, yes, he was superb in some races. We'd be second, nearly won at Valencia that one year. He said, but the thing was, the next week we'd be in 8th place, 9th place. He said, Quartararo is fast tracks, slow tracks, wet, dry. He's there he said, that is something that we haven't seen. And he said, that's what makes him, in Hervé's view, special. And as far as being someone that would challenge Marc Marquez in the future. It's difficult to know because the Tech 2 Yamaha was always a year-old bike. I mean, at the time, Quartararo's first bike was also a bit old. He's obviously on the latest kit now. But that was interesting, I thought, in that's what he saw as being this unique quality that Quartararo has, is that he's fast every week, and that's something that they were never quite able to get with the guys they had. I mean, they had great riders. I mean, Zarco, Spies, Crutchlow, list goes on, doesn't it? They got podiums. They came so close to winning. Didn't quite happen for them. But it was always a bit up and down, wasn't it?
Bit of French solidarity going on there, I feel, somewhere. Hervé's your man. I love Hervé and Guy Poulon.
Well, thank you for that one. We'll go with Bert, who sent that one in. Thank you. And one last question from last week. And each week at the moment during the summer break, we're sort of doing almost like a little feature each week. And last week, the debate was all around Moto E, wasn't it? And Mark Blackman has commented saying, if we can't make the Moto E racing interesting because of the limitations of the bikes at the moment, then why don't we focus on making the racing interesting because of the riders? I propose the field being all legends. So I'm saying, Keith, fancy a go on the Moto E? I think he's got. There's some legs to that.
If If I had £1 for every time someone tried to get me back on a bike, the only legend there is round here, mate, is the one that lives in my head. And that's from a long time ago. Do you know what? I love it, and I'm sure that there is a huge market, as we've seen, for classics, for legends, bigger ones than me, obviously, that are coming back to race and coming back to play. I mean, the Wayne Gardner's Legend series, he was even prepared to pay me to go and play at that game. Some riders never stop riding bikes. Ron Haslam is a great example. There's people like Ronnie. Ronnie's the same age as me. I think there's 6 months difference between us. And Rocket still rides a bike all the time through all his aches and pains. And I tell you what, when I get out of bed, it takes me 5 minutes to stand up straight after all the injuries and clatterings that I've had over the years. So to suddenly risk, and I know, just I fell out of a tree the other week, and it took me nearly 2 weeks to get over that, and that was nothing compared to falling off a motorbike. What was I doing up a tree? Don't ask. Too tight to pay the tree surgeon. There you go. I've said it now. But anyway, I know how my recovery is now compared with what it was like when I was young, and I bounced well. I'm not interested. I mean, people try to get me to do endurance racing once upon a time afterwards, whereas, I mean, endurance racing is great racing. There's no doubt of that. But just once your mind has clicked over to retirement, to finishing with something, most riders are very single-minded. They don't drift. They don't really they drift into retirement sometimes when they really don't want to go. But the fact is they know when the time is there. Even when they're drifting, when they're at the end of their career and they're sliding down that sort of slow slope, they know it's over. And once that starts to get to the back of your head, I mean, I'm convinced Valentino will be thinking like this. The GOAT, the greatest of all time to many, many people. He will be thinking to himself, it's time. And he's just looking for the right opportunity and the right way to do it gracefully, in my view. Honestly, I would be absolutely stunned and amazed if he decided to do another year. And I think that the whole paddock would be, as it is at the moment. I mean, he looks like a younger man now. He's out on the boat. He's got a massive suntan. He's had a good time. He's enjoying his money. And he bloody well deserves it. He's given us all great entertainment for so long. He's the reason why so many people get paid in this sport. It's because Valentino Rossi, globally, has made it a sport for everyone. And I think that it's a great thing. It's a great thing. He deserves his retirement. He deserves all the accolades. I'm not a part of the Yellow Army. I won't be fighting for that particular tribe because I hate tribalism in sport anyway. Don't get us going on that one, Harry. After this weekend that's just passed. But the point is that Valentino Rossi, he should be Sir Valentino Rossi. Or whatever the Italian equivalent of that is.
Yeah. Well, it will be an even bigger shock, wouldn't it, if he made a move to Moto E? But that was our discussion. I don't think that's going to happen.
He's got an electric watch.
I'm not putting that down in writing. But that was our big discussion last week, of course. And thank you for everybody who got involved. This week, though, it is all about the life of Keith Huewen. How long you got? Keith, and I know Pete's got some questions to ask as well, and we've had some listener ones coming too. So we're going to chuck them at you, but very relaxed. Just take it where you want to go. Born, according to Wikipedia, in Southend-on-Sea in Essex, which is correct, but not too far away from me, actually. I'm Essex. You've raced...
You've got a posh voice, though.
I know.
You went to a proper school.
I know. I was actually born in East London, mate. So...
oh, were you?
Yeah.
You should have got out of that, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. Very.
You should have gone to work for BT. They're in East London.
Oh, I don't know. I've heard some things about them from you, Keith. But you raced, of course, for Honda, Suzuki, Yamaha power teams across the 350 and 500cc classes. But before all of that, I want to know, first of all, what was it that first hooked you? How did it bite you? And what made you want to go, okay, I want to be a professional motorcycle rider?